Hey everyone, it's Anthony here at Talk and Review, and today we're talking It Chapter 2. So It Chapter 2 sees the return of Pennywise the Clown, played by Bill Skarsgård, and a host of new other actors who are the older version of the children that we saw in Chapter 1. Now, coming into this movie, I had really high expectations, simply because Chapter 1 was so good. I thought Chapter 1 was really well put together. I thought the acting was on point, and most importantly, I think Chapter 1 was actually really quite scary. It had a few jump scares in there, which you get with modern day horror, but it was actually quite terrifying. And I've seen that movie a fair few times now, and it does actually still scare me. I do have a bit of a fear of clowns, so that probably plays into it, but there's a sense of dread and fear for Chapter 1, which I thought was really, really good, and I was really hoping fell into the second part of the story. So the premise for Chapter 2 is basically everyone's off living their life as an adult now, except for one person who stays in Derry. Now, they see a wave of strange things happening in the city, strange deaths, strange killings, and they call the rest of the group to get back together to fulfill their pact, their promise they made at the end of the first movie, to come back and defeat it should they need to. And that's essentially the premise of the film. So there is a lot to like about this movie, but there's also a lot to not really like about this movie. Overall, the acting is really well. You would expect this level of acting from the calibre of cast that you've got in this movie. Skarsgård again knocks it out of the park, as he did in the first one. His portrayal of Pennywise in this one is just as good as it was in the first one, and it was terrifying and it was great. But I think by far the best thing about this movie is Bill Hader. He's great in it. He provides levity where it needs to be, he provides serious where it needs to be, and he also provides a little bit of heart, which you don't really get to see from him in a lot of his roles, which was really quite surprising to see, and I think he absolutely knocked it out the park. Everyone else, you expect a level of quality with these actors, and you get it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the acting going through. It was great. Scares, it does have a couple of scares in there. Not in the sense of the first chapter. It's nowhere near as terrifying, or you don't get that sense of dread in here, but you do get a couple of jump scares in there. So, you know, if you're a fan of jump scares, you're going to like this one. And I also think it does a very good job of incorporating both adult life and child life, because a lot of this film is comprised of flashbacks from the adults reminiscing about different times of their childhood that we don't necessarily get to see in the first part, that maybe takes part after the first part, or in a chunk of the first part that we don't see. And I think that the transitions from now to back then are done really well, and they tell a nice little story that gives the characters that little bit more development that you want to see from them. However, it's not all good news about this movie, unfortunately. I do think, like I said before, that a lot of the fear and a lot of the dread has been taken away from it. I'm not too sure why, but I think that a big part of it lies in the fact that a lot of CG is used in this movie, whereas I don't think that there was that much CG used in the first one. There obviously was when Pennywise opens up his face and everything, but I think a lot of the CG in this movie takes you out of it because of how ridiculous and over the top these monsters are that Pennywise forms into. When it's done with CG rather than a practical effect, it really does take you out of it, because the monsters aren't really scary. They verge on laughable, which again, when you're watching a horror movie and you want to be scared and you want to feel that fear and dread, when you see these kinds of things on the screen, because they're CG and you know they're CG, you don't really get that sense of fear because you know it's not really there. Also, I will say, with the use of CG, the fact that they de-aged the children really, really took me out of it as well. Now, obviously, you're going to have a difference in appearance from children. When the first part was filmed, they were much younger, and some of them looked much younger. However, because now they're filming the second part a few years after, and children of that age will naturally look a lot different going through puberty and everything, you obviously have to address it. But I think the way that they've done it by using de-aging technology on them really, really stands out. And again, every time that you notice it, it completely takes you out of the movie. And for me, that was probably my biggest bugbear of the film, or my biggest annoyance of the film, is because I wasn't really focusing on what was going on or what was being said. All I was focusing on was how strange the children looked. Not all of them, but just some of them, how strange they looked, because they were clearly digitally enhanced in their face because they de-aged them. It is also a very, very long film. It's clocking in at almost 3 hours long, and it doesn't have to be at all. There's a lot of things that are incorporated into the film that just aren't really necessary. There's certain stories that get told within the main story that just don't need to be included in there, and it does make the film quite long. And if the film doesn't grab you, you will start to feel the length of this film, which is a shame really, because it doesn't need to be that long, and it probably could do with probably being about half an hour less. I think you could get away with cutting out half an hour out of this film easily without causing any issue to the narrative. Overall, it's a solid film. The issue you've got is that the first film was so good, it was always going to be very difficult for this second film to be as good, if not better. So you go in there with high expectations, hoping that it's going to be good, and because it's not, you're going to be disappointed. If you try and look at the film individually as a horror movie, yes, like I said, there are things to like, but it's nowhere near as good as the first part, so it's a bittersweet kind of feeling, really. It's okay for what it is, nowhere near as good as the first part. But now they're both out, would I recommend both Chapter 1 and 2? Absolutely. I've not had a chance to read the book, it's massively long, and I just don't have the attention span to be able to do it, but I did watch the original miniseries a long, long time ago, which is probably what cemented my fear of clowns in the first place, and I love that. This remake is absolutely a fitting remake, and I think that does the original justice. Again, I can't say for the book. I know a lot of it was cut out of the book, and I know that this has changed slightly from what the book entails, from what I've been told and what I've read. However, what I see, I really enjoyed on the whole, so absolutely would recommend it. So we'll leave it there for today, guys. Make sure you hit that like button and remember to subscribe to the channel as well. Also check out our Facebook and our Instagram account, which we're updating on a regular basis. And I will see you lovely people for the next review. Peace!